Hey guys, I'm new to recording. Basically, what I want to do is start a YouTube channel where I'll be going over some of the builds that I do for custom furniture on Sketchup. And as I said, I'm really green to this, so I don't really know how a lot of this stuff works. But I figured I'd start by just doing a quick video, and by no means is it going to be a perfect video. As I said, I've never really done any recording like this, and pretty green to it. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. Basically, I want to show you how I go through a quick table build, and this is kind of a finished model of something I might make for a client, just a generic table. This one here is 40 inches by 80 inches, and I'll show you from the ground up how I put this together. And yeah, we'll just get right to it. So SketchUp's a pretty cool program. It's really easy to work with, especially if you have no experience with it. Um, so for putting something like a table together, it's really quick and it's a good way to show clients what you're doing. So let's just get right to it. So to start a table or any other kind of build, you can use a lot of tools. You can manually select your tools, whether you want to do circles, rectangles, polygons. But for a lot of this, I'll be using hotkeys. If I'm going to be doing rectangles, it's just the R hotkey on the keyboard. So to start it off, I'm going to start with a rectangle. And as I said, that finished version was 40 by 80, but we can do a new one here. Let's just do a generic size, which you can determine up in the measurement section. We'll make this one, let's say 36 by 72. Now we've got a rectangle, and that's kind of your starting point. But you know, the table has thickness and it has a material, so I'll go over how to do all that stuff with you. So to start, as I said, you can select a lot of these tools here, whether you're doing shapes. To add thickness to it, you could add shapes all along it and build this rectangle up that way. Or you can use this cool feature that SketchUp has, which is the push-pull tool, which you can select from your tools, or keyboard shortcut P for push and pull, and you can push it and pull it to whatever shape you want. Uh, Generically, tabletop, you're probably going to be doing about 2 inches. We make our panels to 1 3/4, so I'll just stick with that. And you could write it in 1 3/4 like that, or if you want to do decimal points, you could do 1.75. Both work. You cannot write it like you would write a panel, which is 1-3/4. SketchUp doesn't recognize that, so we'll write it in decimals because it's accurate. And now we've got a panel 1.75 inches. If you want to check it, you can go and select your tape measure tool or your dimensions tool, or keyboard shortcut T. You can get your tape measure out and check it, and there you got 1 3/4. You can check the other dimensions as well if you want, 36, 72, but that works for us. So now we've got our tabletop, and obviously it's a white block right now. There's nothing fancy to it. Um, when I'm working with a bunch of different objects in a build, what I like to do is select everything in a box that I've created, and right away make it a group. And that way, you know, if I'm putting other shapes on top of this, or if I'm moving this shape around, I don't have to worry about things moving around on me and losing a file. So now we've got our group, and that's a good starting point. Um, from here, obviously, you've got your panel, but there's nothing, you know, great about it. You want to add material to it. So we'll start by going to our browser, and you know, you can make this whatever. The one in the finished version was Walnut, so we'll go and search Walnut Panel. You can find a lot of stuff on Google for images. You could have your own image that you could use. It doesn't really matter. So for this one, also what you want to do is when you go on your browser, you want to make sure that you're getting the largest size image that you possibly can. And you'll definitely see that. And you know, there's tons of great stuff to use. I would recommend getting the largest size picture you can. For my panel, I ended up using this image from Shinoki, that posted the image. Whenever you're getting a file, you want to make sure you get the largest size version that's actually there, and not just the thumbnail photo, because that will make a difference. So, grab the file, open the file up. You can open it in a new tab to make sure that you're getting the actual image, and expand it, and then save the image. It's not going to show on this recording what I'm doing with my mouse, but I'm just going to the actual file, right-clicking it, save the image. So save the image. You want to put everything in the same group. So I have a folder for this project, and you can see I already saved this once before. It was Walnut Panel. So let's just do that again. Walnut Panel 2, we'll call it. Now we've got that file. So obviously in this display capture, it's going to show all this recording software, but when I get better at this program, I'll figure out how to transition better, and you won't actually see that. So we'll go back to our working file here, and now we've got that image. So if you want to add a material, you can always press B for your materials list, and there's a bunch of SketchUp materials that you can use. They're not that great, if you look at the wood section, if you want to be doing regular wood panels. A lot of these ones here are ones that I've added. Otherwise, you'd use a generic material. It's mostly like flooring and stuff like that you might use for drawing a home. It's not great for, if you want to show furniture or something like that. Also, putting textures on your file like this, it's not a great way to adjust it. It's really difficult. So I'll show you how I would go about doing it, which is a little bit different. And it's actually a really quick process. So close that materials viewer, and we'll just start from the beginning. Draw out the same size rectangle as the rectangle that's on there. Remember that we made a group earlier, so that's not affecting this panel. So I can double click this and move this off to the side. And what this is going to be is a landing pad for our texture, which is the same size as our table. So we'll go about doing that. It's pretty straightforward. You just go to import. I'm doing this on a Mac, so it might look different on a PC, but find the actual picture that we found. This is the one we just saved. What's really important is that you see these different ways that you can import it. You can use an image, which will import an image, or you can use as a texture, which is what we're going to do, or use as new matched photo. For what we're using it for this application, you want to make sure you click use as texture, and you can import that. And now you've got this texture that you can place anywhere on the file. We're going to put it right on that landing pad, and what that's going to allow us to do is shape this texture for something that we can use. So you can scale it up manually. You can do this later as well, but I like to just scale it up right on that actual rectangle that we made. And now it's on there. Now we have a rectangle with that texture, and you can open this up in the texture. You can position it. You can do all sorts of things with it. You can move it around. We don't need to do that for this application, so maybe I'll do that in a later video. So now that we have that, go back to the texture, and you can click projected, which now allows us to project this, and that'll allow us to put the exact location on this panel, so we get a nice looking walnut panel in the end. So let me just move some of this stuff around so you can see what I'm doing. So we got that. Texture is projected out of these options. You can reset the position, you can edit the textured image. We want to make sure projected is selected. So we've selected projected. Now we can click B, which brings up our materials selector. The hotkeys might be different for Apple and for Mac. For Apple, the command key brings up the eyedropper, and you want to click that, and because it's projected, we can go to our rectangle group and select one of the faces and just paste that right on there. So I'll probably use that for the top and for the bottom. You just want to make sure you select the face that you're going to put it on. And now you've got your top and your bottom. Same thing, you can use that for the side, so we'll just copy this panel. You can go to edit and copy the panel if you want. I just do Command C, which is copy for everything on Mac. And you can paste this anywhere. So what I want to do is paint that one edge. So I'll do that by taking this panel and rotating it. You can click the rotate tool if you have it in your toolbar, or as I like to do, just use shortcuts and rotate that panel that way. And the command for that is Q if you're using Mac. I'm not sure what it is on PC, but this video will help Mac users more probably. And you can rotate this panel in a lot of different directions. You can go around the panel to find how you want to rotate it, or just find a corner that Sketchup will snap to your corner. If you're unsure, you can zoom in, but it should snap right away. And it brings up a bunch of different compasses or protractors. So we want to make sure that we're going to be orienting along the green axis. So SketchUp will show you that, and then you can just rotate it. And in your measurement angle finder at the top, or if you have a generic, I moved mine to the top because my webcam's there, but you want to make sure you're snapping to 90 degrees. And that'll give us the panel in the same direction as what our rectangle is. So bring back your material selector, which is B on the Mac, and the eyedropper again, which is Command on the Mac. Double click your rectangle and you can paste that position texture there. If these don't line up nicely, like maybe you found a sappy section of the panel, you can always move it by going to that actual rectangle and positioning it. You can move this up or down so that it matches better. For our application, it actually matched pretty well, so we're fine there. And then we can do the same other side now that we have that there, and we'll just paste that there as well. So now we have 4 sides of this. So once you're done with these, you can just delete them. You don't need them to keep the projected texture, but we'll keep this panel just so we can do this last side. So I've gone and selected it again, Command C to copy, Command V to paste it, and I'm just going to paste it a little bit out of the way, and we're going to rotate it again. This time along the red axis. You know, this obviously isn't perfect end grain image, but for the application of showing something on SketchUp, it's, you know, totally fine. I don't think anybody's going to notice that this isn't end grain wood. And because we use that same panel, it lines up pretty nicely here. One thing you'll find though is when you go to the other side, if it's important to you and you paste it on this side, it's going to look a little bit different, obviously, because the panel has changed. You know, it's a different orientation. It's not this side of the panel, it's that side that we're pasting. So we'll delete that and we'll copy this again. And we'll just paste it here. And we'll rotate it again, just so that it's perfect for the video, or, you know, as perfect as it can be. Eyedropper again, go to that same side, and we'll paste that there, and you can see that, you know, now we're in the same position, so it lines up a little bit better. And now that we have all this stuff, we can delete all these textures, and you have a pretty nice looking walnut panel. Like, you know, this is SketchUp's built-in display, so it's not great, but when you go to render this, you'll get a pretty nice rendering of a panel. So you've got your tabletop. It's all saved as a group. You know, that's a really good starting point, but, you know, a table probably has some legs. In the last video, or in the finished model, there was, actually I can pull it up here. Let me just find OBS. In the finished model, obviously, we did T-shaped legs. We could do T-shaped legs again, or we can do U-shaped legs, or whatever legs that you think you're probably going to be doing. We'll do U-shaped legs just so that we're not doing the same thing over and over again. Let me show you how I did that. So table legs are obviously going to be inset a little bit on your finished table when you build it for your client. one thing is you probably want to inset it from the edge as well so that you don't have a visual built-in joint. So we'll start again by drawing a rectangle. So we could go from the edges. We can resize this at the dimension section. I find that you're probably going to be looking at around 9 inches when it's finished. That gives you some space for mounting and for the channel. So we can measure this, 9 inches, that's good. Your mounting plate probably has some kind of thickness, whether you're using, 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. I usually use 1/4 of an inch. It's a little bit thicker, but seems to work pretty well for us. And same thing as always, you want to make sure that you make that a group. From here, you could decide, what other kind of rectangles you're going to build on here. What do we say? We're going to make this U shape. So we'll make this U shape. Let's call this 3-inch tube. So we'll make a 3-inch rectangle. Bring back the push-pull tool, and we use P. You can go and select it at the top, but I usually use the shortcut. And there you go. You've got a 3D 1-inch by 3-inch tube. Go ahead and make that a group, and we'll drag it over. So there are a number of ways that you could make this the proper dimension. As I said, you probably don't want it to go right to the edge, because if you made it right to the edge on your finish table, you would see the edge of that, unless you want to see the edge. Sometimes you do, but we probably won't. So we'll push this again, same push-pull tool, move it 2 inches in, and you could move this one in 2 inches as well. You could select 2 inches at the top, or you can just snap it to the one we just made, and it'll do it for you, minus 2 inches. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So I'll go here. Just want to make sure that this is recording the right screen. Double click and push that in 2 inches. Cool. So you can see, obviously we have a lot to do still on this leg, but we're getting there. So normally a dining table is about 30 inches tall. This could be a bar height table or a counter height table. To figure out where this bottom part of this channel is going to go, I usually like to just go from the starting point, measure up 30 inches or whatever height you want to do, call it 29 3/4. You might add leveling feet or something like that. It might take up some extra space, so we'll call it 29 3/4. And you can move this up. You could do the math. You could say, oh, this is a 1/4 inch, this is 1 3/4 inches, and this is 1 inch tall. So you can move it up manually based on that number. I'm lazy, so I'll just draw a rectangle. Take this box, copy it, and this is important, and move it up from the corner here. So it snaps to that corner, and move it up along the blue, and make sure you see that blue line until it snaps into location. We can delete that rectangle now. We can delete that tape measurement as well. And the reason why it was important to copy that there is now we can take this and just select paste in place, and there you go, you have it right there. So you can go from here to finish the U-shaped legs. You can draw more rectangles. We'll do it 2 ways. You can draw a rectangle here and push it and pull it, or you can take one of these guys and copy it and paste it in, and then just rotate it along the green, and you've got your U-shaped leg. And you can go and push this down until it meets there. That's one way to do it. Or you can go and draw a rectangle again. Both of them are fine. Both of them work the same way. Make that 1 inch and push it, and just make sure you snap to that bottom side. So now you've got your U shape, but obviously there's some unsightly lines here, unsightly lines on the corner, and if you go to the expanded view in Sketchup, none of this stuff's going to line up. So we're going to take all of these guys. That one's not a group, so it doesn't matter. But we're going to take these 3 rectangles and expand them. because they're groups right now, or explode them rather. And you can just do that by right clicking with whatever is selected that you want to explode and select explode. So now you can go and delete whatever lines you don't need, and you can see sometimes SketchUp will say, oh, I don't know what you're doing there because you've created new geometry. If that happens, usually what's missing is just a line for SketchUp to understand. So we'll draw a line back in there, and you can see the faces are now back. You can select line in the shapes. I just use L for line. SketchUp's pretty straightforward. If it has a shortcut, it's usually based on the first letter of whatever tool you're using. And you can just delete these lines. I accidentally deleted a face there, but as I said, SketchUp's pretty easy. Finish the geometry and it'll bring it back. Also, if there's complex geometry, you might not want to delete a line. It might be easier to hide the line, just because sometimes it'll be hard to draw something. So you could always hide the line, and it's the same thing. But it's easy enough for this geometry to just delete it because SketchUp does not need it. And you can see from rotating it, we have another face that we lost in this case from the way that we made that side. So we'll just go back and draw that line back in there, and SketchUp will eventually figure out what's going on. Maybe it's not that line, it's this line. So you can see it's missing this line here, so SketchUp doesn't know what to do in this area. So we'll draw it back in, and you've got your faces back. So there you go. You've got a pretty standard U-shaped leg. You know, obviously that joint, you wouldn't have that when you finish your steel work. So we can do the same thing where we can explode this. Go and delete that line. SketchUp's fine with that. Same thing, delete that line. You've got a U-shaped leg. So normally in a mounting plate, like if I were to send this drawing to a fabricator or a welder, they'd need to know where you're going to mount it. So we'll just go and draw that in. So we have that here. Remember we made this a 9-inch plate at the bottom. The reason for that is if we're using a 3-inch tube, you want a decent amount of space that you could fit screw holes or slotted holes in here. So SketchUp's pretty good. It'll snap to points. So if there's a midpoint in this group, SketchUp will snap to it. So the midpoint is 1.5 inches. Do the same thing on the other side, 1.5 inches. Also, if you want the lines to show up on your file like this, if you go from the edge, it'll put a dot there, or it'll do a line along that dot. But we want the line to go all the way through. So if you go from higher up instead of from the corner, if you go from higher up, you can see the line goes the opposite way, which is what we're looking for. So that's why I did it that way. And same thing, if I went from this side, if I wanted to do the next 1.5 inch line, if I go from the corner, it won't show that. But we want to make this grid all the way along it so we can find out where we're going to be putting these holes. So if you went from the corner to 1.5 inches, you know, it just gives you that dot. It's not really useful for us, but if we go from anywhere but the corner, we now have that line all the way across it. And I did it to that dot, but you could just as easily do it from the side and then manually write it in at the top. We'll say 3 inches. Now we have a line at 3 inches. We don't need that line though, so we'll delete it. We can delete that dot as well. And then we can go from the other side, do the same thing. If you write in a measurement at the top, SketchUp will remember it and snap to it. I did 3 inches, which isn't useful for us, but if we were doing 1.5, we'd only have to do it from one side before SketchUp would remember and continuously do 1.5 inch increments as many times as we want. We only needed it that once, but just so you know, it's easy and it's nice to use. And we'll use it here actually as well. So the last couple locations for screw holes, we want to put one in the center, which for us is 14.5 from this point to that point, which is important because now we have 14.5. We can take that number and we can divide it by 2, which is 7.25, or you can use a calculator or whatever. Same thing, it gives us that dot, which isn't really useful because if we did everything by that dot, then we'd have to do it again on the other side, which would be pretty annoying. So make sure you don't do it from a corner or you won't get that nice line. So why is that important that we have this grid? Now we know that these are 7 1/4 increments. So if you wanted to do drill holes in the mounting plate, you could go and take your circle and make whatever size hole, 1/8 of an inch, let's say. 1/8 of an inch radius is a 1/4 inch hole, by the way. And then you could use that push-pull tool to push it down. Now you can see there's a hole that goes all the way through. I like to fabricate with slotted holes because slotted holes are better for woodworking. Might not be best for whatever application you're using it for, but I'll show you quickly how I would draw a slotted hole. Just draw a rectangle at whatever size your slot you're kind of looking for is. For us, it's probably about a 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch rectangle. I'm going to show you quickly. I'll make a bunch of lines on this, but I'll delete them later, but I'll show you why it's important. So it's easier. SketchUp snaps to midpoints. So I could go and write all these measurements out, but you can see it's at the top, it's giving you measurements. The midpoint for this will be a 1/4 by 1/4 because it's a 1/2 inch by 1/4 rectangle. So that gives us that midpoint, which we're going to use that line. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. And then we'll just make a couple more lines to make it easier to draw some circles to make this slotted hole. So now that we have these 2 points, we can take the circle tool and draw a circle. I use C, the keyboard shortcut, to get that circle tool out, or you can go to the top and select circle, whatever's easier for you. And now we've got some lines on here. We don't need all these lines, but you can see this is kind of the slotted shape that we're looking for. You can go and delete these corners now because we don't need those. And I'm just selecting them and pressing the delete key. You could also highlight and erase it, but it's easy enough for me on my keyboard to delete it. And we want to keep some of these other lines here just because it'll make it easier to pull this shape around, but we don't need all of them, so we can delete some of these lines. We just want this point. That's the point that we want. So I want to delete some of these lines, and now I can take this, get my M for move tool out, and I can move it around from that point. Otherwise, you'd have to go and find it, which is pretty inconvenient, but so we'll keep that for a minute. We'll go and copy it. You can highlight it and copy it, or go to edit and copy the shape. It's easy enough to just press Apple and the copy key like we did earlier. So when we made these lines we found out are 7 1/4 apart to do even increments. So the reason why we did that is because now I can take these, and instead of making these one at a time, I can just copy this shape and make it a bunch of times. So I'll copy it. Apple C is the command for that, and I'll move this. We don't need to keep this original piece and shape. We'll just paste it again there. And distance, select the distance, 7.25. And we'll go command, paste in place. So now these holes will be 7 1/4 apart, centers on center, which is what our distance is. It might be different for you. Whichever your distance is, use that. So now that we've done that, we can go and delete some of these lines here because we don't need them anymore to pull it around. Double click it to select everything. If you just click that, it won't select the edges, so always double click. Copy it again, and you can just move it. You don't have to move it from any point. Just make sure it's on the red axis. Move it on the red axis, not the green axis or the blue axis. Move that again, 7.25. Go to edit, paste in place. SketchUp does not have a keyboard shortcut for that, but you can add it. I just haven't. And we'll do this over and over until we have that as many times as we need it. For us, it's 5. So we'll do it 4 more times. Now that we have all of these, select all of them, and we can copy all of them. You could paste it right onto the file, but you can see it's not lining up from the center point because Sketchup didn't grab it from there. So what I'd like to do is find somewhere else, and remember we drew those points. You can go and select it from that same point and move it onto our file there. This is a group still, so moving these won't affect that group. And we go to the other side as well. Grab it from those lines, paste it onto our file. Now we're done with those lines, we can go and delete it. Just select the lines individually. And we're done with that. We're done with the guides as well. You can keep this if you want. I would probably just make a group and hide it, just in case you want to modify that somehow and you don't want to go redraw those slotted holes again. So now we have these holes on here. Oh, by the way, if you hide it, you can go to View, Hidden Geometry, and there are all the holes there. And you can unhide it, but we don't need to do that, so we won't do that. So these holes are on here, and we want to push these through, but this is a group, so that push won't work. So we'll quickly go and explode this group. Now we can just go and push these down. You could either push it to a certain measurement, you can push it up, whichever way you want, but you could also just follow that edge and it'll push through the whole shape there. So we'll do that. We'll just go around pushing all these holes in, and that'll give us our slotted holes that we need in our table legs. So you could do this to both sides. You could do it to one side and paste the other side. It's quick enough for us to just do it to both sides because there aren't that many. But maybe for your application, you're doing a lot of these slotted holes. It might be easier to just make these panels and then copy the whole panel once it's done. Like I wouldn't draw this leg a second time. I'm just going to copy it and move it to the other side. So there you go. You've got a leg. You have your slotted holes in there. This one's a U-shaped leg instead of the T-shaped leg, but you make them the same way. So now I'll go and I'll make that a group. Same as always, it's easier to edit the group. You could just give this a color if you just wanted to make it a certain color. The SketchUp textures aren't great, and there are other programs that might be better for doing textures and whatnot. The metal textures that SketchUp comes with, they're not great. Like that doesn't look like any kind of metal that you might see. You know, that you can move this, you can edit that texture, but it's a lot of work. Usually for metal, most of the powder coats we do will probably be black or something like that anyway, so this works fine for what I use. And now you've got a leg. You've got a U-shaped leg that you might see on a table. So we'll just take that group, move it to the edge, just for measurement's sake. Take the same group, and we'll move one to the other side. I'm making this video, and my girlfriend doesn't want me to keep making the video. But I'm almost done here, so she'll be happy. We'll paste this in place. This was supposed to be 10 minutes. She's watching TV and it was taking longer than 10 minutes, so we're almost done though. It'll take 2 more minutes. And you know, table legs usually inset about 15 inches. This one here is 3-inch wide panel, so we'll move this in. It might not be 3 inches. It's a U-shaped leg, so it doesn't really matter. We'll just move it in the same way it's inset, which is 2 inches. The reason for that is the table legs usually block your feet, but if it's a U-shape, it won't block your feet. So we'll just move it in 2 inches. And obviously you're going to install this on site anyway. These legs can go anywhere. The client will probably want to decide that for themselves anyway. So there you go. You've got a finished table. Take everything here and we'll rotate it. You don't have to rotate it. You can just move your camera. But we'll rotate it because it's easy enough to do that. You want to make sure it snaps to the right position. So you can see at the top 180 degrees. Now we can just take that, move it up the 30 inches that the table is tall. And you've got a drawing of a table that you can send to your client, and pretty much a 10-minute video, even though obviously Nicole says it took a little bit longer than that. But we've got a walnut table with some black U-shaped legs, and you can send that to your client, and it's pretty cool. You can take this file and you can save it as a PDF by clicking print, and that brings up your printing section. I don't actually want to print it, so I'm going to go to PDF, save as PDF. In that folder that we've been working on, you want to see the print quality. They have draft, standard, high, and extra high. That'll determine the size of your PDF. You go to vector print, it won't use those textures that we found, so make sure that is not selected. Keep that on extra high because we want a nice drawing. We can preview this before we save this, and that should bring up our preview window. There you go, you've got a file. If you want to save this, you can also put measurements on here. So 72-inch table, 36-inch wide, 30 inches tall. If you're going to be saving this as a PDF and you're going to show it to somebody, you probably want to take these and just increase the size a little bit so it's easier to see. Go back to our print settings, open PDF in preview. Now you've got your finished table, and we'll save that as whatever you want to call this, whatever you want to call this file. Doesn't really matter. We'll call it finished table. Now you've got that on a PDF, and you can send that to people. You can zoom in, and that texture quality is as big as whatever file that you had was, which for us, we got that large size image, so it's pretty big. And you can show them, oh, that's what walnut looks like, or maple, or whatever wood that you happen to be using. So that's it. I hope you liked the video, and hopefully I get a little bit better at using this recording software, and I can make some other cool files for you, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.